Hey buddy, it's your old pal Scott, and this is Let's Talk Tabletop. There's been something that's been weighing on my mind for quite some time about 10th edition Warhammer 40k, and it's the fact that the psychic phase is absolutely dead. We've lost all flavor in the psychic phase, and there's a lot to unpack here, so let's get into it. So the psychic phase in Warhammer 40k has gone through a lot of different iterations over the years. If you remember 6th edition, I think it was, that they had the warp charge dice and you had the whole dice pool. It might have been 7th edition. But the point is that it was way overly complicated and it required a ton of different dice and you had to spend warp charge points to try to cancel out the other guy's stuff, and it was a whole mini game we absolutely did not need. Previous to that, it was like a leadership test, which you almost always got off because your psychers were like leadership 10 or whatever. And then we start going to the Age of Sigmar method, where there's a warp charge value that you have to basically roll equal or above in order to get that power off. Well, I got a letter a little while ago from a viewer called Yada, and they said that they wanted to know how you could use miniatures that more or less suck on the battlefield, and they wanted to see how you could change it to make them not suck so bad if they're your favorite models. They said they played Kill Team and they had a bunch of dwarves and sisters novitiates and all that, and they said that they just didn't play the way that they wanted to play. And they wondered if I had any suggestions for that. So I do have some suggestions for that. Normally, I don't know about Kill Team because I don't play that, but normally you could put a leader near them that would buff them and enhance that unit. Normally, you could rely on psychic powers, like in Age of Sigmar. Age of Sigmar still has it. But you could rely on psychic powers to buff units and make them a little bit better than they normally would be. And that works out really, really well. And that way you get to use the models that you want, and they have a little more punch to them or a little more durability or whatever that they don't normally have. And even though you are paying for the wizard or whatever, the psychic power is technically free. So it's a free buff on them if you get it off. Unfortunately, 10th edition 40k has completely cut out the psychic phase and completely cut out any randomization whatsoever. There is no casting, there is no denying, there's none of that. And to be honest with you, I never thought I'd say this, but I miss the psychic phase. I miss when 8th edition and 9th edition, when they had a target warp charge value you had to roll, and then they could deny you and things like that. It's really sad when you think about it, that we used to have tables of 6 spells, or even more in the case of Space Marines, where they had like several tables of 6 powers each, and you could choose different powers and they would do all sorts of stuff. And now it's just like, are you attached to a unit? Okay, they get a slight buff, which is no different from another leader attached to the unit, right? And then the slight buff, oh, and you do something against psychic attacks. Dude, what even is a psychic attack now? Like, beyond the keyword, psychic powers and psychic attacks are so far removed from the game now that it used to be something when you'd get smited or you'd have to ward off some sort of power. But a lot of it's like sustained hits now or something like that for your unit. And it's not even anything flavorful. It's nothing that's characterful. Like, oh, my guy is like shooting lightning at you or something like that. That doesn't have any of that feel. It's just like, oh, when I shoot, I get, sustained hits 1. Okay. It's so bland. I don't really know why they took that out. I understand that if they wanted to shorten the game and cut out phases, that in your command phase, just like the hero phase of Age of Sigmar, they might move the psychic phase into the command phase, where you had to do your stuff before you move, and that makes you a little more tactical, because you have to make sure you're in range of stuff at the end of your previous turn in order to be in range of it now. That's pretty interesting, and I kind of wish they would have done that. Unfortunately, they did none of that. Even if you brought the stupid warp charge dice back, which I absolutely hated, but even if you brought that back, that would be more interesting than sustained hits 1 when you are attached to a unit. So dumb. So, let's take a look at a couple different psychers and see just how far they've fallen. What could this sexy dude do during 9th edition? Well, he could cast not 1, but 2 psychic powers. He could also pick from the 6 Librarian discipline powers, like Shrouding. Your Phobos units can't be shot if they're so far away from the enemy. Oh, what about Soul Sight, right? Phobos, oddly enough, could reroll hits and ignore cover. That's pretty cool. Mind Raid, it's basically just
Smite, but it's different for characters. Hallucination, -1 to attack rolls. That's very useful. And then you got Tuberculosis Curse, which makes people slower and they can't move as well. And then finally you got the Temporal Corridoral, and then you can move your own units. All these things, pretty helpful. So what's our guy up to now? Well, he gives his unit a 4-up Feel No Pain against psychic attacks. I guess that's something. And then while he's leading a unit, he gives the unit Sustained Hits 1. Fantastic.
Now, isn't that just downright sad? That old boy is past his prime. He's lost all of his effectiveness. He's lost all of his possibilities. He can no longer affect enemies in any direct way. He can no longer affect his own unit except for some very lame ability that nobody would choose if that were on a psychic table. And he just needs to be put down. He needs to go the way of Old Yeller, I think. We need to just put him out of his misery, bolt gun to the head, and that's it. Now, I don't actually play Space Marines anymore. I sold that army a little while ago. I do play Grey Knights, but another one of my favorite psychers is the Magus from Genestealer Cult. Now, I own 3 of these things because I used to love the things that they could do for my Genestealer Cult army. Let's take a look at the old Magus and see what they've done to her.
Let's take a look at this bold beauty in 9th edition. What could she do? Well, she could pick 2 psychic powers from the Broodmind discipline and use them both. Very, very nice. And this set has a ton of bangers, like Mass Hypnosis, -1 from the attack's characteristics enemies. Mind Control, -1 to hit on enemies, which is fantastic. Then we've got Psionic Blast, which is basically a better Smite. It's Smite, but better. Mental Onslaught is the same thing. It's just slightly more tedious, but it's a better Smite. Then we got Psychic Stimulation. And you could, like, retreat and fall back and still charge and shoot. It was really good. Might from Beyond is +1 to your attacks characteristics? Holy crap! In a melee army? Fantastic. Alright, so what do we get in 10th edition? Well, she gives the unit she's leading a 5-up Feel No Pain. Oh, just against psychic attacks. And then she can, on a 2 through 5, give them -1 to hit for enemies. And on a 6, they can't shoot at all. And on a 1, she does D3 mortals to herself? Holy crap. This is awful. And only 1 person can do it each turn? Ugh.
I think I need a moment, guys. Seriously, I don't ever bring Maguses now. Ever in my Genestealer Cult army. And I own 3 of them. So now they're just worthless. Because they don't do anything. So this is my little funeral for the Psychic phase of Warhammer 40k. I'm hoping that they do something far better than this in a future edition, and no doubt they will. If you've played long enough, like I've been playing 15 years, you see the come and go, the ebb and flow, the tides come in, the tides go out, of how they change the editions. They essentially just change them for the sake of changing them. And unfortunately, just like the terrible Warp Charge dice pools that we had in 6th or 7th edition, this is just another footnote that I'm really not pleased with. I think they really got it right for 8th and 9th edition for Magic, and I love the way Age of Sigmar plays. So, Yada, you need to use Psychic powers, but not in 40k. You said you play Age of Sigmar, and that's great, because Age of Sigmar still has a ton of different options. The characters themselves know a power, and then typically you get 6 other powers you can choose from. And that is the way that you buff your units and make them playable when they're otherwise not very good. So thank you to all my Patreon patrons for supporting the show. If you would like to support the show, you can like, subscribe, comment, share, join the Patreon, whatever you want to do. And I would love to hear if you actually like this new edition, or you don't, as far as the Psychic phase or lack thereof. I guess I'll catch you on the flip side.